Hey everyone, CNN here back with another disingenuous corporate broadcasting. Today we're taking a look at a short prose poem from an author who goes by the title of The Guy on the Gray Penny. Yeah, The Guy on the Gray Penny. The Guy on the Gray Penny supports me on Patreon, and so I want to say a huge thanks for that. And yeah, this poem is titled, Sir, I've Got a Question Mark. There is a content warning for this poem for themes of death in war. And with that, we are going to go ahead and get into it. Just one quick note from the author, and then of course I'll read the thing that I always read at the beginning of these videos. So the author said, I think the question mark is a riddle of itself. Okay, we'll keep that in mind as we read. Another thing to keep in mind, I'm not a professional reviewer. I'm just some guy on the internet who likes reading and writing. The opinions expressed in this video are only opinions. My interpretation of or reaction to the work will not be the same as everyone else's, for better or for worse. I will look for the good and the bad, but no matter what I say, don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep writing. And for those in the comments, please be respectful. Also, I'm so sorry for any mistakes or mispronunciations of names or words. If I come across a word that I don't want to say for whatever reason, I will replace it with the word blank. So, with that, we can just get into the poem, and I think I might just, zoom in here, seeing as this is what we've got. Okay. Sir, I've got a question mark. Only once the enemy has stopped firing can I stop firing. So was it a chamber malfunction? Was it a bullet I forgot all but too late? Is it all backwards? Say, it just may be the point, under the scythe, asking a question. Safety is number one to spread. Irony across land. Backwards, steady, I know. Okay, interesting. Rather avant-garde, which obviously not necessarily a bad thing, you know. I think there's a lot of other poetry like this out there. I will say, though, it's not really the kind of poetry I would seek out personally. Just not my thing. So, understand, Guy on the Gray Penny. I do have a bias already kind of going into this, just saying, this is not really my preferred type of poetry, but all the same, we'll take a look at it. We'll see what there is to know. I see the word backwards a lot, and so just just for the sake of it, I do want to try reading the whole thing backwards, so bear with me on this, viewer. No eye, steady eye backwards, land across irony, spread to one number is safety. Question the asking, scythe the under, point the bee may, just it say. Backwards all it is. Late to but all forgot I've fro bullet, it was malfunction, chamber, it was so. Firing, stop I can, firing stopped has enemy the once only. Okay. So that didn't quite work as I might have anticipated, but I don't know, there was actually, I don't know, kind of something there. Not totally. I don't think that was the author's intention or anything there, but anyhow. So let's just start with the title. Sir, I've got a question mark. I assume that's supposed to say, Sir, I've got a question, right? And that's just, I don't know, sort of an E.E. Cummings way of denoting that, I guess. I don't know if that would be the best example, but anyway. And then initially I thought Sir, S-U-R, was kind of like S-I-R, but I don't know, spelled differently for some reason. But then the dash makes me think that the speaker is being like cut off, kind of similar to this phrase in the poem. Was it a bullet I forgot all but too late. So this word I think was supposed to be from, but then the speaker is cut off, I guess because they forgot because of memory, right? So I don't know, maybe this was supposed to say like surprise, and then they were cut off. I really don't know. In Spanish, S-U-R means south, but I don't think that's quite anything. So, sir, I've got a question. Only once the enemy has stopped firing can I stop firing. So was it a chamber malfunction? Was it a bullet I've forgot all but too late? Okay, so again, I acknowledge that this is not really my preferred type of poetry. And part of the reason is that while you do want your reader to be doing some work, right? You don't want to just spoon feed your reader. That would make for a very boring poem. While you do want them to do some work, At the same time, you can't have them doing all the work, right? One of my workshop leaders in my MFA program, he was an editor for a really long time, and he worked with this avant-garde writer and accepted a lot of his pieces. But there was one time when the writer sent a piece over that was just a bunch of symbols, like no letters, just a bunch of like shapes on the page. And so the editor, my workshop leader, of course, was like, "What is this?" And the writer was like, "I want the reader to be able to find their own story in what I've put on the page here." And regardless of how good of an idea you think that is, that literally is making the reader do all the work, right? And this is not quite the same, obviously. We have actual language here, right? And I am going to pick out some things that I notice that I think are interesting. But at the same time, I do feel just a little bit similarly, where it's like, I feel like I'm being made to do most of the work here, which, in many ways, I like that sort of thing. But at the same time, it can be a little frustrating when I feel like I don't have all the necessary pieces, right? It's like a mystery. Like, imagine reading a mystery book and there is no solution, right? You would feel frustrated. It's like, why did I even put in the effort reading that if it was not leading up to anything, right? And I'm not saying that this isn't leading up to something because I believe that it is for sure. But if I don't have all the necessary pieces to figure it out, then I won't be able to know for sure, and that's going to be a little frustrating. And of course, as a poet, you do have to realize that readers are going to interpret your work however they will, right? Um, and there are pros to that and there are cons to that. And Guy with the Great Penny, it seems to me that you already know that and you've made peace with that basically. Like, I don't think you would put this poem out there if you didn't already know that people were going to make of it whatever they were going to make of it, right? um, but I don't know. I feel like I try to avoid being misunderstood in my poetry, right? And like I said, I don't want to spoon feed my reader, but at the same time, I do want to give them all the necessary pieces that they can at least approximate what I'm getting at. Um, One thing I'll note is that words like firing and chamber malfunction and enemy, right? Those those are good pieces. Those are pieces that do sort of help me understand what's going on here, right? And even without the content warning that there were themes of death and war, I probably could have understood that this is a poem about war, right? Um, but with all that said, that's kind of a lot of prelude before we actually get into the text. I'm sorry about that. Let's let's actually take this really piece by piece, right? So only once the enemy has stopped firing can I stop firing. So was it a chamber malfunction? Was it a bullet for So that's where I get lost. I can understand the first question, right? And I do sort of picture this based on both the title and based on the question. It sounds like this is a soldier asking their superior a question, right? The question being, so I only stop shooting once the other side stops shooting, right? That's the question. But then I don't really understand what this is saying, especially because the speaker is like cut off and then they ask another question. So was it a chamber malfunction? Was it a bullet for Okay, I guess how I would interpret that is like it sounds like the soldier, framing this as a soldier asking their superior a question. It sounds like the soldier noticed that the superior stopped firing, and so they're asking, so was it a chamber malfunction? Is that the reason you stopped firing? Or was it a bullet for, and then they get cut off. I've forgot all but to late. And I don't know, it's phrases like those that also add to the difficulty in this poem because obviously that's not grammatically correct, right? I forgot all but to late. Um, and I think there's another phrase like that. We'll take a look as we keep going. I like my interpretation a little bit so far, where it sounds like we're talking about hypocrisy during war and hypocrisy in violence, political violence, right? Um, but I don't really understand the cutoff. And this phrase in particular, I've forgot all but to late. I don't get it. Is it supposed to read, I've forgot all but too late, like TOO instead of TO? Even then, I don't know for sure what that's supposed to mean. I forgot all but too late. Is it all backwards? I don't know if I know what that's quite referring to either. Say, it just may be the point, under the scythe, asking the question. Under the scythe is a pretty interesting phrase. Reminds me of course, the Grim Reaper, right? But then also like a field, a field ready for harvest, or I don't know, a field being weeded, sort of. Being, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, to make sure that it doesn't like overgrow, right? I don't know. Say it just may be the point under the scythe asking the question. Safety is number one to spread, irony across land. Safety is number one to spread. And these are phrased as questions. So, like, maybe this line is to say, like, people go to war so that they can spread safety. And that, of course, is the irony, right? The irony across land. And then backwards, I study, I know. Yeah, I just don't entirely know what to make of this. Like I did, like I picked out some decent big ideas. I think like the hypocrisy of leadership during war, and then also the fact that war, doesn't actually solve anything. It doesn't actually create peace, right? Still, though, it's just I don't know. I'm in a position where like I want to understand everything that this poem is saying, and yet I don't know that I can, right? And that's kind of frustrating, kind of disappointing. Now, that being said, like I said up at the top, I sort of have a bias against this kind of poem, right? It just feels far too inaccessible for me. Even when I try to analyze it, kind of like I have, I still feel like there are pieces that just aren't coming together. And like I said, that's too bad. I'm okay with a poem being kind of inaccessible on its face, but like once you start digging into it, all the pieces come together. But I'm not really sure if that's what's happening here, right? I feel like there are still things going on here that I just can't get a proper hold of. And again, I'm going to reemphasize this type of poetry just isn't quite for me. But that's not to say that it's not for everyone, right? Like, I think there are a lot of journals that would be interested in poetry like this. But for me, for my taste, it's just not quite my thing personally. It is very curious, and so I'll give it that. And, I do like poems that prompt questions, but I do mostly want answers to my questions, right? Now, as for the going back to the title, after having read the whole thing, Sir, I've got a question mark. And then the author said, I think the question mark is a riddle of itself. Hmm, sorry if I'm just not smart enough to solve it. um, again, I think we're supposed to read that as, Sir, I've got a question. But even with that being the case, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I just can't quite get a hold of this, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry, guy on the great penny. Sorry if this isn't helpful for you. Sorry if this isn't what you were hoping for. I really am curious, I want to know more, but I feel like with the poem as is, I don't know. I don't know. There's just not much more I can know that I'm able to know. Tough. It's tough. Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like maybe this wasn't super helpful. I hope at least some of this was. Commenters, as always, I'll be super interested to know what you guys think on this one. Um, yeah, there is a place for poetry like this for sure. The beautiful thing about poetry is frankly that there's a place for all poetry, right? Which is awesome. So yeah, you kind of just gotta, if you want to write poetry like this, you kind of just gotta find the place for it, the place that will take it, right? And maybe you have to carve out that place. But like I said, for my taste, I don't know, I would prefer like just a little bit more from this poem, a little more that I can actually latch onto, sink my teeth into, a little more that I can like understand, right? But again, that's a lot of personal preference talking. So I think we'll leave it there for this one. Viewer, thank you for watching. Guy on the Great Penny, thank you very much for submitting. Seriously, I'm sorry again if this wasn't helpful or what you had hoped for or anything. But thank you so much for submitting and thank you for your support. It really, really does mean a lot. Ultimately, we are going to leave it there. Thank you guys. And keep in mind, this is a rough draft.